A warm, damp towel touched him below his stomach. It was 3 p.m., patient care time in the VIP suite. The breathing of the 47-year-old heir to a billionaire's fortune changed, and something began to stir beneath his thin hospital pajamas. It was so large it even lifted the blanket, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. "It's nothing to worry about. You're still young," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But a curiosity awoke in me, something I hadn't felt in 8 years. "Sorry, does this happen every day?" His voice trembled. As I folded the towel, my eyes met his trembling gaze. An unexpected word slipped from my lips. "Should I help you with my hand?" He slowly nodded. "I'll give you $5 million. That night, all boundaries between the 50-year-old caregiver and the 47-year-old wayward heir disappeared. I'm about to begin a story I've never been able to tell anyone. Before I start, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Thank you. My name is Sandra Miller. I work as a caregiver. 8 years ago, I divorced my husband, and since then, I've been raising my son alone, making a living with this job. At first, I worked part-time at a 24-hour store, washed dishes in a restaurant, but as I got older, my body started to fail me. So I got my caregiver certification, and now I'm a veteran with 15 years of experience. In the 8 years since my divorce, I haven't had a single romance. Honestly, it felt like all feelings related to romance had simply dried up inside me. My whole life boiled down to taking care of my son, earning money, and surviving day by day. I thought that as a woman, I had died long ago. Then I got an offer to become a private caregiver in a VIP suite. $2,500 a day. That's more than double what you get for caring for a regular patient. The condition was long-term work, at least 3 months, but I had no reason to refuse. So I headed to one of the prestigious private clinics in the center of Manhattan. It was a special suite at the very end of the corridor on the 13th floor. Opening the door, I was momentarily taken aback by the luxury. The room was 3 times larger than a regular one. There was not only a bed for the patient, but also a sofa bed for an attendant, a separate bathroom, and even a small kitchen. The window offered a panoramic view of the skyline. "Hello, I'm Sandra Miller, your caregiver starting today," I introduced myself. The man lying on the bed turned his head and looked at me. He looked about 47, tall with a strong build, but now, being bedridden, his face seemed a bit gaunt. "Don't look at me," were his first words, then followed, "Don't talk to me, just do what's necessary." His voice was cold and sharp. In 15 years, I've seen all kinds of patients, so I didn't panic. "Okay, if you need anything, just say so," I replied calmly and began to put my things away in the corner of the room. According to the information the coordinator gave me, the patient was David Whitmore Jr., the youngest son of the chairman of the board of the pharmaceutical holding company, Medicorp. 3 months ago, he was in a motorcycle accident, speeding, and injured his spine. Now, he was bedridden. The problem was the patient's past. He was a headache for his family. While his older brother studied management, preparing to take over the company, this patient had been left to his own devices since youth, disgracing the family with drinking, women, and gambling. He even got divorced 4 years ago, so his family hardly ever visited him. Looking around the room, I realized it was true. No sign of visitors, not a single flower, not one fruit basket. The room was empty. Such a spacious, luxurious place felt strangely lonely. I tried to help him with lunch, but he refused. When I said patients with spinal injuries shouldn't overexert themselves, he shouted at me to get out. I sighed. A spoiled rich kid, but a patient is a patient. With that thought, I silently got to work. The first few days were very difficult. The patient avoided my gaze and got irritated at every attempt I made to do something. "Don't touch." "Don't need to." "Leave me alone." These phrases were repeated several times a day, but a patient with a spinal injury can't do almost anything for himself. He needs help with everything: eating, using the toilet, hygiene procedures. Eventually, David had to accept my help, and I could feel how much it wounded his pride. This man is also unhappy, I thought. On the outside, he's a billionaire's heir, but in reality, he's a lonely man, abandoned by his family, locked in a hospital room. So a week passed. As a professional caregiver, I silently did my job, and the patient, it seemed, was gradually getting used to me. His tone remained sharp, but he no longer yelled like before. And then, one morning, I entered the room at 7 a.m. as usual and saw something unexpected. The blanket on his bed was oddly tented, as if a tent pole had been set up underneath. But I didn't know yet that this capricious patient would awaken feelings in me that had been dormant for 8 years. After saying hello, I opened the curtains. Warm morning sunlight flooded the room. David was still lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling. When I asked how he was feeling, he replied curtly, "Fine." His voice was much softer than a week ago. I said I was going to change the bed linen and asked him to relax while I turned him on his side. As usual, I pulled back the blanket to change the sheet. And at that moment, my hand froze. Beneath his thin pajamas, something was very distinctly protruding. It was such a large tent that it even lifted the blanket. "What is that?" flashed through my mind. In 15 years as a caregiver, this had happened. Morning physiological reactions in men are natural, but this size— "Don't look." David's voice trembled. His face was flushed. He tried to pull the blanket up, but due to his spinal injury, he couldn't move properly. He muttered an apology and said he couldn't control it. I quickly pulled myself together and reacted professionally. "It's quite all right. It's a natural phenomenon. Don't worry about it," I said as calmly as I could, and continued changing the sheet. But honestly, there was no calmness inside me. I hadn't seen anything like this in 8 years. 8 years since the divorce. I thought I'd completely lost my feminine feelings, but now my gaze kept getting drawn there. "No, Sandra, get a grip." Chastising myself, I quickly finished changing the linen. As I leaned low over the bed to tuck in the sheet, I felt David suddenly look away toward the ceiling and hold his breath. When I asked if everything was okay, he said yes. But I sensed something strange. From then on, every morning was the same. When I entered the room, the blanket was invariably raised like a tent, and David would turn away in embarrassment. He'd repeat his apologies, and I'd reply that it was fine, a sign of health. After a week, I found myself noticing it more and more. Every time I changed the sheets or made the bed, my eyes would involuntarily wander there. What's wrong with me? Have I lost my mind? Even when I got home at night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Feelings I had completely forgotten for 8 years seemed to be slowly awakening. I'm a woman too, after all. Probably just curiosity. Making excuses to myself, I couldn't deny that something inside me was changing. By the second week, as I was changing the sheets as usual, I felt David watching my reaction. He saw me looking, but he didn't cover himself with the blanket. A strange tension began to build in the room. "Sandra." The patient called me by my first name for the first time that day. He said it was nothing. He just wanted to thank me for my hard work. I replied that it was my job. It was a brief exchange, but I felt something had shifted. Something was beginning, beyond the bounds of patient-caregiver relationship. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought, this isn't right. I'm a professional. But somewhere deep down, I already knew I wouldn't be able to stop these feelings. I didn't know yet that an even more significant event awaited me the following week. In the third week, on one particular day, it was time for the bed bath. A patient with a spinal injury can't go to the bathroom himself, so he needs to be washed right in bed. I said I'd help him, and David quietly agreed. His responses had become much gentler. I brought a basin of warm water and several towels. Saying I was starting, I asked him to tell me if anything was uncomfortable. I unbuttoned his pajama top, exposing his upper body. Before me was the chest of a 47-year-old man. You could tell he used to work out a lot. His muscles were still there, but after 3 months in bed, he'd lost some weight. I began to gently wipe his chest with the damp towel. When I asked if it felt nice, he said yes. There was tension in his voice. I moved slowly from his chest to his stomach, from his stomach to his sides, but his breathing became more and more irregular. When I asked if he was in pain, he said no, he was fine, but his voice trembled. I turned him on his side to wipe his back and leaned low over the bed. And at that very moment, David's reaction became particularly strong. His face reddened, and he began to breathe heavily. I asked again if everything was really okay, but only heard yes in response. I found it strange, but I continued. Finishing with his back, I laid him on his back again. "Can you manage the lower part yourself?" I asked carefully. "It's an intimate area, after all." "I can't bend. My arms don't reach." "Sandra, maybe you—" David said, turning his head away. In his voice was a mixture of embarrassment and pleading. I hesitated for a moment, but this patient somehow felt different from others. All right, I replied, saying I'd continue. I wet a new towel and wrung it out well. Gently, I lifted the bottom part of his pajamas. At that moment, his body began to react visibly. Under the blanket, something started to rise. In a trembling voice, he whispered apologies, saying he couldn't control it. I tried to stay calm, saying it was fine and I'd be quick. But my hands were shaking too. The moment the towel touched him, the patient let out a sound like a moan. Ah! That sound made my heart sink. I tried to wipe him as quickly as possible, but gently. Yet those few moments felt like an eternity. His heavy breathing, his trembling body, the sensations transmitted to my fingertips. What am I doing? My mind went blank. Saying I was done, I hastily removed the towel and dressed him again. I heard his apology, but replied it was fine, and quickly left the room with the basin and towels. Only in the corridor could I take a deep breath. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding wildly. What's happening to me? That night back home, I couldn't sleep. Lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I kept thinking, I couldn't get his size out of my head. And why was his reaction so strong today? Had I done something wrong? No matter how much I thought about it, there was no answer. One thing was clear. Bath time had now become something I both dreaded and, honestly, looked forward to. You've lost your mind, Sandra, I asked myself. But something inside me had already changed irreversibly. And a week later, an unexpected visitor came to the room. In the fourth week, on one particular day, the door opened and in walked a woman. Tall, slender, dressed in designer clothes, around 40. She asked if I was the caregiver, coldly thanked me for my work, and immediately approached the bed. She said she'd heard about the accident and came. David looked at her in surprise. Catherine? It was his ex-wife, the one the coordinator mentioned, Catherine, whom he'd divorced 4 years ago. She asked me to leave, so I stood in the corridor. But the door wasn't completely closed, and I could hear their conversation. Drunk again and got on a motorcycle? Catherine's cold voice. Sorry, I'm sorry. We've been divorced for 4 years. We're strangers to each other. Still, thanks for coming. Don't mention it. The hospital called me. My number was still in the family contacts. You know, David, you've lived like this your whole life. And this is where it's gotten you. Even your family has given up on you. Your brother stops by once a month, if that. Silence. The 4 years of marriage to you were the worst of my life. Drinking, women, gambling. Not one peaceful day. I'm sorry, really. I don't need your apologies anymore. Just take care of your health and live a normal life. I'm going. In less than 10 minutes, Catherine left the room. She met my gaze but walked silently down the corridor. After waiting a bit, I returned to the room. David was staring out the window. Would you like some water? Yes. I handed him a glass. His hands were shaking. He couldn't hold the glass, and some water spilled. Are you okay? I asked, wiping up the water, but he didn't answer. After that day, the patient became even more silent. For several days, he barely spoke. Then another visitor came. It was David's brother, Andrew, a man around 50 in an impeccable suit. Dave, it's me, your brother. How are you? Andrew. The doctor says if you work hard at rehab, you'll be discharged soon. Yeah? Dave, get it together, will you? You know how disappointed father is? Despair was audible in Andrew's voice. Please this time work hard and start living like a human being. Quit drinking, find a decent job. I'll try. Not try, do it. You're 47. How long will this go on? Sorry, brother. Don't apologize. Show me with actions. After about half an hour, Andrew also left. Before leaving, he called me over. Caregiver, please take care of my brother. He has a difficult personality. It's no problem, I can manage. Thank you, this is for coffee. He tried to give me an envelope, but I refused. No need, it's my job. When Andrew left, the room became even quieter. David seemed utterly crushed. That evening, as I helped him with dinner, he said quietly, Sandra, I really am a worthless person. Don't say that. No family, no ex-wife, nobody comes. My brother visits out of obligation. His voice trembled. Only you treat me like a human being. My heart clenched at those words. For the first time, I took his hand. You're going through a very hard time. Yes, Sandra. Tears welled up in David's eyes. It was the first time I'd seen a 47-year-old man cry. I squeezed his hand tightly and said, "Everything will be okay. It will all work out." From that day, something changed. We had crossed the line in the patient-caregiver relationship, and a thin, emotional connection began to form between us. And the next day, David tentatively spoke to me. In the 5th week, one afternoon, I was helping him change position. "Sandra," his voice was unusually serious. I told him to go ahead, and he said that lately, because of him, my job had become harder. My hand paused for a moment. I asked if I had done something wrong. He said no and looked me straight in the eyes. "I really like you." My heart dropped. "Don't say that. I know it's strange, but it's true." His voice trembled. "In the 4 years since my divorce, no one has cared for me like you do. Seeing you every morning is my only joy. David, I have to tell you something else." David continued carefully. "When you bend over, I've seen that you saw." I didn't understand at first what he meant. "In the opening of your uniform, your chest." My face flushed. This? At first it was accidental, when you were changing the sheet." David lowered his head. "But during the bath, when you washed my back, then I saw everything." I tried not to look. Now I understood why his reaction had been so strong 2 weeks ago during the bath. "So that's why that day—" "I'm sorry, but honestly, since that moment, I started seeing you differently. Not as a caregiver, but as a woman." I was speechless. I felt both shame and awkwardness. "But I'm the caregiver." That was all I could manage. "I know, but it's really hard for me." There was pleading in David's voice. "Every morning, this reaction, and I can't do anything myself. I've been enduring it for 3 months. It's unbearable." Silence. In the room, only the muffled sounds of traffic from the street could be heard. "Sandra?" "What?" My voice trembled too. "Could I ask you for a favor?" "What kind of favor?" "Could you help me with your hand?" At those words, my mind went blank. "David, I'll give you $5 million. It's not much money to me." "What do you take me for?" I jumped up. No, David said hastily. "It's because I like you, and the money is just so you don't feel taken advantage of." I couldn't finish listening. I ran out of the room. I hurried down the corridor to the restroom. Leaning on the sink, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Flushed face, frightened eyes. What had I just heard? That night back home, I couldn't sleep. Lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I kept thinking, $5 million. My annual income. But it wasn't about the money. The real problem was something else. Because honestly, I was curious too. 8 years. 8 years since the divorce. I hadn't perceived men at all. But now, I'm also a woman. 8 years. After tossing and turning all night towards morning, I made a decision. The next morning, I arrived at the room earlier than usual. When I opened the door, David looked at me in surprise. "Sandra?" "David?" I called him by his first name for the first time. "About what you said yesterday." David's eyes widened. "Just this once. And it will be our secret." "Are you sure?" "There's a condition," I said calmly. "We'll think about the money later, and I'm not doing this out of pity for you." "Then why?" "Because honestly, I was curious too." Saying this, I felt my face burning, but the decision was made. For the first time in 15 years as a caregiver, I decided to break the ethics, not as a professional, but as a woman. That night, just after 11 p.m., after the night nurse's final rounds, David and I were alone in the room. It was a little past 11. The night nurse had finished her last check, and the lights in the corridor were dimmed. The VIP suite was at the end of the hall. No one came here at this hour. I quietly locked the door. "Sandra," David, lying in bed, looked at me. "Don't worry, I'll help." I took out the medical gloves I'd prepared and opened a tube of lotion. I dimmed the lights in the room and drew the curtains. I placed a chair next to the bed and sat down. I told him to close his eyes. I heard David's trembling voice. "Are you absolutely sure?" I replied that it was okay, but my voice was trembling too. I hadn't been this close to a man since my divorce. My hands shook, but I slowly opened his pajamas. Squeezing lotion onto my hand, I warmed it with my body heat so the cold wouldn't startle him. Saying I was starting, I carefully reached out my hand. At that moment, David's body jerked. A soft moan escaped. My heart pounded wildly. How big he is, flashed through my mind. I moved slowly, very slowly. David's breathing grew heavier and heavier. Sandra, I told him to be quieter, as a nurse might pass by. About 5 minutes passed. David's body began to tense. He said it was almost there. I said it was okay. I finished carefully, using the prepared towel. David breathed heavily, staring at the ceiling. He whispered a word of thanks. I took off the gloves and asked if he felt better. He said yes, and took my hand. Sandra, can I kiss you? I hesitated for a moment, but having crossed the line once, I nodded. Sitting on the bed, I leaned in. David's lips touched mine. It was a gentle, cautious kiss. A man's lips which I hadn't felt in 8 years. Long-forgotten feelings washed over me like a wave. When the kiss ended, I quickly stood up. I was about to say I had to go, but David asked if I could stay the night. His voice was full of pleading. He promised nothing would happen, just to be near. After a moment's thought, I nodded. I unfolded the cot and lay down. When I turned off the light, the room went dark. Outside the window, the lights of the night city were vaguely visible. I heard David's steady breathing. What am I doing? I thought, lying there staring at the ceiling. In 15 years as a caregiver, never anything like this. It was absolutely wrong, ethically. But somehow my soul felt so calm. Only now did I realize how lonely I had been. Living alone, suppressing my feelings, thinking only of earning money and raising my son. I thought I had died as a woman long ago. Then I heard David call my name. I answered. He thanked me again. I wished him good night. That night, for the first time in a long while, I slept peacefully. The next morning, David tentatively asked for my account number, saying he'd transfer the $5 million. I replied, not yet. Then he asked if he could ask for something else. My heart beat faster again. From then on, 2 or 3 times a week, after 11 p.m., I would stay in David's room. At first it was awkward and thrilling, but gradually I got used to it. Our relationship changed too. When David asked what I wanted for lunch, I said we'd order what he wanted. He said he wanted to eat with me, so we'd choose what I liked. The sharp, capricious David was gone. In his place was a caring, warm person. One evening, we had a long conversation. When he asked why I divorced, I said my husband cheated. That was 8 years ago. He said it must have been hard. I said at first, yes, but now it didn't matter. David took my hand. He said he had a similar story. His ex-wife left him because he was a wastrel. I said he wasn't like that. He said I was the only one who thought so. We shared our wounds, our loneliness, our feelings of abandonment, and grew closer. At the end of the 2nd month, one night, as usual, after 11, I stayed in the room. Sandra, I love you. The sudden confession caught me off guard. He said it was sincere, that since his divorce, he'd never fallen in love like this. I said we were too different, but he asked, how are we different? We're both lonely. He was right. We were both wounded, abandoned, lonely people. I like you too, Dave. My voice trembled as I said it, but I added that I didn't know if it was right. He said it didn't matter if it was right or wrong. We were comforting each other, and I couldn't help but nod. That night, we held each other for a long time. We were no longer patient and caregiver, but a man and a woman. But this peaceful time didn't last long. One night at 11:30, it was half an hour later than usual, and I was calm, when suddenly the door opened. It was David's brother, Andrew. Dave? He started and froze. The room was dark, and David and I were sitting close together. Why is it so dark? What were you doing? He asked. David quickly replied that they were just about to sleep. Caregiver, you work late. In a trembling voice, I said the patient had called me. Andrew stayed for about half an hour and left, telling his brother to work hard at Rehab and that he'd visit next week. When the door closed, we sighed with relief. That was close, David said and apologized. I said it was okay, but we needed to be more careful. But even after that, our relationship continued. 2 or 3 times a week after 11, only we remained in the room. Our feelings grew deeper. David began to work hard at his rehabilitation. Sandra, I sat in a wheelchair today. Really? Congratulations. He said it was because of me, that he was trying to get better quickly to see me. His words warmed my heart. After 2.5 months, David could move around in a wheelchair. His recovery was so rapid that even the doctor was surprised. And one day, the doctor said he could be discharged next week. Hearing this, David and I froze. Discharge. That meant parting. 3 months had passed. David could now move around the room in a wheelchair. Rehabilitation was successful, and the doctor set a discharge date. A week before discharge, David suggested we stay in touch after he left, but I shook my head, asking if that was a good idea. When he asked why, I said, "You need to start a new life. I'm just the caregiver who was here for 3 months. If you really want to start over, someone like me would be a burden for you." He begged me not to think that way, but I continued. I was happy too, truly happy. But it's better for us to end it here. You're a billionaire's heir, and I'm a caregiver. And there's a 5-year age difference. He asked, "Does that matter?" I replied, "Yes, that's reality." A few days passed, the evening before discharge arrived. We spent our last time together. "Sandra, I loved you," David said, taking my hand. "I was happy too," I replied, holding back tears. I told him to truly start a new life, quit drinking, find a decent job. He said he had changed a lot because of me, and I said that wasn't enough yet. He needed to try harder. We held each other for a long time. It was our last embrace. Morning of discharge day. David's family and a driver came to the room. "Let's go home," said his brother Andrew, and David quietly agreed. Before leaving, David handed me an envelope. "Here's 5 million, like I promised. Sandra, because of you, I survived." I took the envelope but immediately placed it back in David's hand. I didn't do it for the money. "I can't take this." He asked how he could thank me, and I smiled, saying, "Just live well. That will be the best thanks. Get your act together. Prove to your family that you're worth something. You can do it." Tears welled up in David's eyes. His voice trembled as he said my name. "It's time for you to go," I said. The wheelchair rolled out of the room. I stood by the window and watched them get into the car. The car started and gradually disappeared from sight. I was left alone in the empty room. While tidying the bed, I found a letter under the pillow. I unfolded it and read, Sandra. ***. Thank you so much for these 3 months. You were not just a caregiver to me, but the most important person in my life. I will never forget what happened between us. Like you said, I will get my act together and start living right. You made a man out of me. I will be grateful to you for the rest of my life. David. Reading the letter, I cried. Thus ended this 3-month story. A year passed. I was still working as a caregiver. I heard nothing about David. One evening, I was watching TV at home. Economic news was on. The anchor announced that a Medicorp employee, David Whitmore Jr., was making headlines as the first person in company history to start from the lowest position without a relevant degree. My hand froze. On the screen appeared David. He was standing in front of a truck, sweating, moving boxes. The journalist explained that the chairman's youngest son had taken the simplest job in his father's company, starting from the very bottom. Then they showed an interview. I repent of my past. I want to learn everything from scratch. It was David's voice. He looked much more energetic and healthier than a year ago. I watched the screen and smiled. Good for you, Dave. That night, I took out the letter I'd received a year ago again. I quietly read it and put it back in the drawer. Looking out the window, I whispered, I'm doing well too. Thank you, Dave. The next morning, I received a file for a new patient, a 65-year-old man, post-stroke rehabilitation. I took the folder and headed to the room. Life goes on. We each went our own way, but those 3 months remain the most precious memory in both our lives. Thank you for listening to this long story to the end. 50-year-old caregiver Sandra and 47-year-old wayward heir David. Perhaps ethically their relationship was wrong, but it was 3 months during which two lonely souls healed each other. Sandra didn't take the money because it was love. And a year later, David really did change. Just as Sandra said, he started a new life. They never met again, but they remained the most important mark in each other's lives. What do you think about the choices these two people made? Leave your opinion in the comments and share this video with friends. See you in the next stories. Thank you very much for watching. To continue following deep stories at life's twilight, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and support us with a like. Each of your clicks gives me strength to create new videos. This has been the Almost Honest channel, where we talk about love blooming at life's twilight, about the loneliness and courage that each of us can experience.